our body operates the same exact way, except we think a snarky email, a last minute deadline, a client we don't like is a lion chasing us. And so our body responds the same exact way to a snarky email, a client, whoever, as if a lion were chasing us. And what we need to do is communicate with our brain, hey, fight or flight response is great. We sometimes need it if we're in the middle of the road and a car is coming to get us out of the way. But we don't want to stay in that fight or flight response. We don't want to stay in what's called the sympathetic nervous system, because what happens when we stay in that place, we have chronic health effects and long-term impacts of stress. So in an ideal society, what would happen is we'd have one stressor, our fight or flight response might trigger, and one of two things would happen. We either, one, would react, so we'd jump out of the way of the car. We would then give our bodies time to return back to baseline. So sympathetic nervous system would trigger. We'd go into fight or flight. We'd jump out of the way of the car. We'd say, whew, that was a close one. I'm going to take some time to relax, to downregulate the nervous system, to go back to baseline. But how many people on this call, and you may have seen Sean do this slide before, my business partner, if you were in the other lunch and learn, how many people on this call experience just one stressor at a time? And I can see some of you, no one's raising their hand, right? So we have stressor after stressor after stressor, and we're not taking the time to return to baseline, nor are we taking the time to communicate with our body, hey, this isn't a lion chasing us. It's not life or death. So we're doing one of two things. We're either we're jumping out of the way of the car, and then we're not allowing ourselves time to return to baseline, or we're not communicating with our bodies, hey, we don't need the fight or flight response right now. It's just a snarky email. We can return our bodies to baseline and deal with this. So what's happening is we're having stressor after stressor after stressor. We're not communicating with our bodies, taking time to return back to baseline. And because of that, we're experiencing this severe loss of resiliency. So what we want, and what we're going to talk about today, are techniques that help us return to baseline, help us turn off the fight or flight response, down-regulate the sympathetic nervous system, turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is in charge of rest and digestion, and return us back to baseline. So that's what mindfulness helps us do. And I'm gonna open up the chat, and I invite you to type in it. Who has done a lemon imagery with our team before? Anyone on this call done this lemon imagery? I hear, see some head shaking. Good, good. If anyone's done it, you can type into the chat that you have. Okay, Tabitha has, yeah. Thank you, Tabitha. So one or two of you have, but majority haven't. Great, Kate has, fantastic. Great. So I promise to those that have done this, this is the only redundant thing you'll see the rest of the presentation. But if you have done it, I invite you to use what we call a beginner's mind in mindfulness. And that's pretending like you haven't done it before. I've made some limoncello. I'd love some, Chuck. I'm 7 months pregnant, so I'd love anything with alcohol in it at this point, honestly. So let's go ahead and find a nice comfortable position. We're gonna do this exercise together again. If you have done it, just try and see if you can bring curiosity to this exercise, bring a fresh perspective as if you haven't done it. And if you haven't done it, just keep an open mind with me. So find a nice comfortable position, meaning you'll uncross your legs, take the soles of your feet to the ground beneath you. Maybe you find a nice tall, long spine. Perhaps you roll the shoulders down and back. And if it feels okay for you, go ahead and close the eyes. And if it doesn't, just take a soft gaze downward, blurring the vision. And just start to settle into stillness. So get out any last fidgeting, any last movement. And perhaps this is the first time you've found stillness all day since you woke up. Just take a moment to notice what that feels like. Notice your feet on the ground, your sit bones on the seats, the top of the head. Your entire body here in this space, this present moment. And take a few deep inhales through the nose. And a few deep exhales out through the nose or the mouth. And then when you're ready, I want you to envision yourself in a very familiar place, standing in your kitchen. So imagine yourself in your kitchen. Maybe it's not too far from where you're seated right now. So maybe you're barefoot, maybe you're in slippers, your pajamas, but you're standing in your kitchen. Picture the countertops, the tile, and see if you can really visualize standing in your kitchen in your mind's eye. And then I want you to walk to the fridge and open the fridge and take out a lemon. And if your mind says, I don't keep lemons in the fridge, I don't actually even buy lemons, today, for some reason, there's a lemon in your fridge. And take that lemon out of the fridge. And walk over and get a cutting board and put that cutting board on top of the counter. And put the lemon down on top of the cutting board and go find a knife wherever you keep those. And then with the knife, walk back to the cutting board and take that lemon in one hand and cut the lemon in half. And then hold that one half of the lemon and cut a little wedge like you were going to make a drink with it. And then pick up that wedge of the lemon, that juicy yellow lemon wedge, and take it to your nose and inhale, smelling the lemon. Perhaps noticing in your hands the juice, the seeds, the texture of the lemon, noticing what it smells like in your mind's eye. And then when you're ready, open your mouth and take a big bite of that lemon. So bite into that juicy lemon, noticing the taste, the texture, what it feels like in the mouth. And just notice if there's any physical, emotional, or mental reaction in this moment to biting that lemon. And then when you're ready, you can let that image fade away. Perhaps again, you notice your feet on the ground, your sit bones on the seat, using the body to return you back to this present moment. And take one deep, deep inhale through the nose and one deep, long exhale out through the mouth. Coming back. Whenever you're ready, gently opening your eyes if they're closed. And then I'd love for people to either unmute themselves or use the chat. What did you notice? Anyone have a physical reaction? Chat or unmute yourself. My mouth watered. Yeah, Kristen. Anyone else's mouth water? Tartness. I love lemons. Great. Anyone kind of pucker their face? Tabitha says the lemon was tart. My nose scrunched. I clenched my teeth. Awesome, Jackie. Thank you. Yeah. So a lot of people on the call had a physical reaction. Yeah, puckery reaction, Susan, that happens to me too. So many, many people had a physical reaction, and not everyone will, but many people, yeah, face scrunched, had a physical reaction. And I'm imagining, now I can't see all of you, I'm imagining none of you actually had a real lemon in your hand, correct? Right, so those people I can see are nodding. Oh, someone actually does have, I can't see your name, but someone has a bag of lemons. That's hilarious. It's the first time it's ever happened leading this exercise, thousands of times. So no one actually put a real lemon into their mouth, but you created a physical reaction with what? Your mind. Fantastic. So we created a physical reaction in our bodies simply by thinking about eating a lemon, thinking, using our minds. So our minds and our bodies are intricately connected, and we forget that. In our society, we're not taught that we can control our mental state with our body, with our breath and things that calm us down, and we can control our physical state with our mind. So all of these techniques are called mind-body techniques. Mindfulness is one mind-body technique. There are many, many, many techniques out there. Mindfulness is one thing that helps us foster and strengthen the connection between our brains and our bodies. And by doing that, we're able to down-regulate the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, returning us to baseline and quite literally changing up to 8 parts of our brain associated with stress. So consistent mindfulness practice changes up to 8 parts of our brain. So I love that research because it helps us really make the case for this technique and help people understand this is not just a woohoo thing. It really is a scientific, evidence-based practice that can change our brain, down-regulate that fight or flight response, and return us to baseline. This is the definition of mindfulness. You can read through it. The definition that I like to use is the opposite of autopilot. So we're constantly on autopilot. We drive places, we don't remember how we drove there. Where did I put my keys? What did I come in this room for? What was I supposed to do? What was I working on? We're constantly on autopilot. Mindfulness is the opposite of that. It's bringing our attention into the present moment in a non-judgmental way. It's noticing whatever is happening around us or within us and not judging it, but being completely aware of that. And why does that help us? Why does that help us with all of these things? Well, first of all, it retrains our brain to focus, and it decreases anxiety and stress and depression, because when we are in the present moment, we can't be worried about the future and we can't be depressed about the past. We're truly in the present moment. So these are some of the benefits of mindfulness. I'm going to share all of these research studies with you today. I'm not going to go too far into it, but you can read more about it. Here's the organizational benefits of mindfulness: self-awareness, mental clarity, increased cognitive flexibility, creative thinking, innovation. So a lot of individual and organizational benefits from consistent mindfulness practice. We also know Aetna, which is my favorite example to share, trained 13,000 of their employees and saw an 11-to-1 return on investment from mindfulness programming alone. They saved $2,000 per year in healthcare costs, and then 62 minutes a week on average of increased productivity per employee who took the 8-week mindfulness course that they did. So not only can this impact us on an individual level, but it can also impact us on a collective, organizational, community level as well. So how the heck does mindfulness connect to uncertainty? So we're wired to crave certainty. And in fact, there's research to show that when we're in traffic, that what really irks us, what really makes us mad as humans or anxious or stressed, is the lack of control we feel when we're in that traffic jam. So a study of US bus riders found that when people were given the minute-to-minute wait times, their anxiety and frustration decreased even if they had to wait longer for the bus. So someone who had to wait 2 minutes, if they didn't know that it was going to be 2 minutes, they felt anxious and stressed, more so than those people that had to wait 7 to 10 minutes just because they knew they had to wait 7 to 10 minutes. In addition to that, studies also show that job uncertainty takes a greater toll on our health than actually losing a job. So being in a job where you think you might get fired 6 months, a year, 2 years is actually more unhealthy for you than just getting fired from the job. And then finally, study participants who knew for sure they would receive a painful electric shock felt calmer and less agitated than those who were told they only had a 50% chance of getting the shock. We love certainty. We would rather know a negative answer right now than wait for a positive answer. Our brains are wired like this. So when certainty is questioned, our brain defaults to the limbic system. So we love uncertainty. Our brains are wired this way because our brains are wired to protect us. And if we can't be certain about something, we don't know what's coming. And if we don't know what's coming, how can our brain protect us? So when there's uncertainty, our brain defaults to this part of our brain called the limbic system. In the limbic system, the emotions that are generated are anxiety and fear. And this system also includes the amygdala, which is this part of our brain that triggers that fight or flight response. So we go to this limbic system. Whenever there's uncertainty, we automatically default to this. And a lot of the times, the limbic system will respond with a knee-jerk fear reaction in order to try and protect us. So defaulting to the limbic system at first is natural. We don't want to stay there. And it's really important even to just be able to note, oh, my brain's defaulting to the limbic system. Okay, I know this is what's happening. I'm going to shift out of this. Because when we are in the limbic system, that's the part of our brain that would rather have that negative answer sooner than a positive answer and live in the unknown. So it's the part of our brain that might do something rash. Let's say our boss says, hey, can you meet with me in a week? I have something to talk with you about. And our brain, our limbic system says it's going to be bad. I'm going to get fired. This is horrible. They worry about it for a week. And instead of waiting, we reach out to our boss and say, let's just meet now. I know you're going to fire me. I know what this is going to happen. And then your boss says, that's not what I was going to talk with you about at all, right? I was going to meet with you about something completely different. Limbic system is a knee-jerk reaction in order to get certainty. And it might look like this. So some of you may recognize these symptoms or these things as things you've been experiencing or people in your life. So when we're operating out of the limbic system, when we're in this place of uncertainty, we're often hypervigilant of every single little thing. We have intense or wrong fit emotions to small events. So it's when someone cuts us off in traffic and we scream the F word at them and flick them off and say they're, the worst person in the world. Or we're trying to do one little thing. We're trying to carry the groceries in and we drop the groceries and we just freak out. We fly off the handle. That's our limbic system. We make premature decisions without all of the information, freezing and making no decisions at all. So a lot of people in 2020 have been doing this. Cognitive overload. I'm in the limbic system. I can't make any decisions right now. Filling in the gaps of what is unknown with assumptions. And then intrusive thoughts. We might have these thoughts of, I'm going to get sick or something bad's going to happen. All of this is our limbic system. I'm going to pause here. Anyone have any questions on this or anyone been noticing any of these things in themselves or others right now? And that's fine if you don't want to share, but just checking in. Okay. I'll leave the chat open if you want to. So again, although it's normal to default to this at the first appearance of uncertainty, our whole lives are full of uncertainty, right? So this year is a year of increased uncertainty, certainly, but we have uncertainty all of the time. And if we leave that unchecked, our limbic brain spirals, which increases worry and anxiety. So we want to get out of that limbic brain because worrying doesn't actually help us. And some people have a negative reaction to this slide. Well, you're just telling me not to worry, right? Worrying is natural. Yeah, worrying can be a common response. Definitely all of us worry, and there's no need to beat ourselves up for worrying, but it doesn't actually help us. So living in constant worry, this fear state actually depletes our energy, runs down our nervous system. It doesn't prepare us for what's coming next. We can sit and worry all day long, and it doesn't actually help us. We're not prepared any better. It just breeds more worry and rumination, inhibits good decision-making, and it doesn't productively impact the final outcome. So what we want to do is we want to notice, hey, I'm defaulting to the limbic system. Here's all those symptoms that woman Meriden told me about. I notice I'm doing some of those things. Oh yeah, I just screamed at my kids for no reason. I must be in the limbic system. Okay, what do I want to do now? Because I know staying in this place isn't productive for me. And I think we love this quote. Sean, my business partner, and I says, if I had my life to live over, you guys have probably heard this a lot, I would perhaps have more actual troubles and few imaginary ones. So what mindfulness helps us do is notice, hey, I'm really in an imaginary future that hasn't happened yet and may never happen. I'm in the limbic system brain. I'm going to come back to the present and shift out of that. So one of the easiest ways to do that, to shift out of that limbic system brain, to decrease worry and anxiety about uncertainty, is to come into the present moment, to retrain the brain to focus on the present moment. And we're going to walk through a mindfulness exercise today that will help you do that. Any questions before we move into that practice? No? Does all make sense so far? See some head nods? Okay, fantastic. So go ahead and find that nice, comfortable position again, just as we did when we started. And maybe you roll your shoulders down and back. And perhaps you find your feet on the ground beneath you again. And maybe you bring attention to the top of the head. The eyes heavy in the eye sockets. The jaw, the tongue, the mouth. And perhaps you imagine the weight of the head melting into the shoulders, and the weight of the shoulders melting into the hips, and the weight of the hips melting into the knees, into the ankles, out through the bottom of the feet. The entire body grounded here in this space, this present moment. And maybe with each exhale, you imagine the weight of the body melting down from the top of the head, moving all the way through the body and out through the bottom of the feet into the ground beneath you. Perhaps you can imagine your feet pressing into the ground. And maybe you imagine the ground pressing back. Noticing what that support feels like. And then bring awareness to any sounds that you hear. So just notice, how many different sounds do you hear in this moment? And see if you can notice those sounds without giving them a story, without labeling them good, bad, annoying, loud, soft, but simply hearing, noticing the vibrations of the sound. And then pick just one of those sounds to focus on completely. Just for the next 30 to 60 seconds or so of silence, pick one of those sounds to focus on completely. And every time the mind starts to wander to a different sound, to a thought, to a physical sensation, whatever it might be, just notice my mind is wandering and come back to that sound again and again and again. And then let that focus go. And just perhaps note what that was like for you. Perhaps the mind was very busy, maybe not. Just noticing. And then bring the attention inward and notice the breath. So notice first how you're breathing. So perhaps in through the nose and out through the nose or the mouth. Notice where the breath wants to go in the body in this moment. Maybe it's all the way up by the collarbone, maybe it's the side lungs, or maybe it's all the way down by the belly. Just noticing, where does the breath go in the body in this moment? When I inhale, what parts of the body move? And when I exhale, what parts of the body move then? being really curious about this thing that our body does all day long. And then perhaps if it feels good for you, direct the breath down to the low belly. So inhaling, low belly inflates like a balloon. And exhaling out, every ounce of air leaves the body. Taking a few more deep, low belly, diaphragmatic breaths like this. Careful not to force or strain. And then if it feels good for you today, perhaps you start to count the breath. Inhaling for a count of 2 and exhaling for a count of 4. So doubling the exhale to the inhale. And if that feels like too much, perhaps you inhale for 1 and exhale for 2. And then for the next 60 seconds of silence, simply focus on the breath. And if you'd like to keep counting, if that gives your mind something to hold on to, you can do so. Inhaling 2, exhaling 4. Or if you'd like to just focus on the inhale and the exhale, you can do that. But just as before with the sound, simply notice the mind's natural tendency to wander. And then bring your attention back to the counting or back to the breath. Again and again and again. And then let the focus on the breath or the counting go. And just notice what that experience was like for you. Maybe it was difficult to sit still. Maybe the mind wandered a lot. Just noticing. And then notice again your feet on the floor beneath you, sit bones on the seat, tall, long spine. Taking a few final deep inhales and exhales to bring you back to this present moment. Just noticing how the mind, the body feels right now. And then whenever you're ready, you can gently blink open the eyes, coming back to this moment, the screen. And then I'd love to hear what that experience was like for you. So perhaps starting with the chat is most comfortable for people. So why don't you type in a few words of either how you're feeling right now or what you noticed. Was that difficult, pleasant, challenging? So how you feel or what you noticed, what that experience was like for you. Lovely, ready for a nap, yeah. So I worked with the Bengals for 3 seasons and the Browns for 1, teaching them these techniques. And whenever I would get the players in a small session, it took probably about 30 seconds for them to fall asleep doing guided meditations. So certainly normal. Restful. I grew easily frustrated by how often my mind wandered. Fantastic, Sarah. Jackie says similar, calm, but had trouble focusing. That's great. So that is normal. So a lot of people think the purpose of mindfulness is to just completely clear the mind, have no thoughts. The purpose is to simply notice the mind is wandering. The mind will always wander, I promise. I've been meditating every day for 15 years. My mind still wanders. The more you meditate, the longer you meditate and practice these techniques, the quicker you'll notice your mind is wandering and you'll be able to return back to what you're focusing on. That is how we rewire our brains to focus on one thing. The other really important component here that I'm also reminding my perfectionist husband about constantly is the non-judgment part of mindfulness. Your mind will always wander. Notice with compassion. Oh, I'm human. My mind was designed to wander. Okay, let me come back to what I'm focusing on. There's no use in beating yourself up for your mind wandering because our brains were literally designed to do that. Your mind will always wander. Come back. With mindfulness practice, the goal is to pick, well, there's a number of ways we can practice. What we're doing today is called concentrated, focused meditation. And the goal with this particular kind of practice is to pick one thing to focus on, notice the mind is wandering, and come back. It's that simple. Focus on one thing, mind wanders, come back again and again and again. So Kristen says she was interrupted. I love this because particularly lately when you're working at home, there might be kids, there might be noises we're not used to. We might not be able to easily close the office, or you might be at work in an office and someone might come knock on your door and interrupt you. See if you can use those extra sounds and distractions as part of your practice. So I like to tell people if that happens to you, you're now an advanced practitioner. Welcome. Notice and come back. Notice and come back. So there's construction outside of my window right now. So when I did my meditation practice this morning, it was construction the entire time. So I just used that as part of my practice. Okay, there's a noise. I'm going to notice and come back to my breath. I'm going to notice and come back to my breath. And certainly my mind wandered more because of that noise. But okay, that's an opportunity for me to notice and come back. What questions do you have about that?
Can I actually make an observation?
Sure, yeah.
So I did a meditation retreat. I don't know why I thought years ago that was the way to learn. I just went to a retreat and I spent an entire day being so angry at myself because I was doing it all wrong. And the second day I was like, I give up. I'm just going to go and sit there. And then I realized, oh, that's it. When I learned to be kind and gentle with myself, I got so much more out of it. And I took that kindness and gentleness into all my relationships. So I think that's probably the most important thing I get out of meditation.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it exemplifies two things. One, we're human beings, not doings, but none of us are taught how to actually just be anymore. So mindfulness practice reminds us how to just be. There's nothing to do. It is sitting and watching whatever we're watching. And then also, Deborah, I love that point because the most important thing we can do for ourselves with this practice is to be kind to ourselves. There is no right way to do this. There is no perfect way to practice mindfulness. I love working with lawyers. I have an engineers group right now, and a few of them actually have emailed me and said, am I doing this right? What is the perfect way? And there is no perfect way. And that's our mind's natural tendency to want to find that perfect way. Am I doing it right? Did I get an A+ on meditating today? And sometimes you will sit and you will hate this practice because it is hard and you will feel like you are not doing it right. Your mind will say you're failing. Great. Practice longer on those days. Come back more. Come back the next day. Treat yourself with compassion. Notice, well, my mind's really busy today. Okay, I'm human. Tabitha says, I notice my mind interrupts me less, about 5 minutes or so. Yeah. So typically, we're able to what we call drop in or find more quiet in the mind the longer we practice, depending on how advanced of a practitioner you are. So I know Tabitha has a practice. I know that she's done this. If you're just starting out, 5 minutes might seem like Mount Everest to you. I can't sit for 5 minutes in silence. And Deborah definitely did a very extreme thing. I do not recommend for anyone to start with a silent retreat when they're starting out with this practice. Like any behavior change, we want to start small. So I really encourage, if you're not practicing right now, starting with just 60 seconds to 2 minutes a day, making it a habit, and then going up to 3, 4, 5. And the longer you practice, Tabitha is exactly right. You might find that The first few minutes, your mind's really busy. It's thinking about whatever you were just doing, what's coming next. It's trying to settle in. And then the longer the body is still, the easier it is for the mind to become still. So remember that mind-body connection with the lemon. Once we start to settle in physically, the longer we sit, the easier it is for the mind to say, okay, I get what we're doing here. We're being still. We're calming down. This is a really effective practice for uncertainty, because when we're uncertain, we go to that limbic system and our mind spirals. We say, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if? And I know as lawyers, you're actually trained to think about all the what ifs, all the negative things that might happen, right? So your brain's primed for uncertainty. You're primed to worry. You're taught this in law school. What mindfulness helps us do is say, yep, those things might happen, but I'm going to come back to the present moment. Yeah, that might happen. I'm going to come back to now. I'm going to come back to now. Really important point. It does not mean you're not planning for the future. It doesn't mean you don't spend time thinking about those what ifs and planning for them accordingly. We just don't want to live there all the time. So we want to spend time. We've planned ahead. We know what might come. We're ready for all scenarios. And now let me come back and live here in this present moment. Because when we constantly live in that future moment, we're just constantly anxious. We're increasing that anxiety all of the time. So we want to use mindfulness to bring us back into now. We can use that through a number of different things to focus on. The most commonly used thing is the breath, because why? It's always with us. It's super simple and it's consistently happening in the present moment. You can use anything. So we actually started with a sound. Who liked the sound better than the breath? Anyone? Everyone liked the breath better. Okay. So we focus on a sound and then a breath. So tell me what it was like to focus on a sound. Anyone, you can use the chat or you can unmute yourself. Too many sounds, yeah. I chose my breath as the sound. Yeah, Deborah, fantastic. I have a fan in my office. It was making me sleepy. Yeah, sound is more distracting. Okay, yeah. So Jackie actually liked the sound. She had something tangible to focus on. Great. So we started with the sound and then we moved to the breath. So Alex said he picked sounds that stopped first, so had to switch. Great point. So if we're picking a sound, we want to pick a sound that's going to happen consistently throughout our entire practice. So Tabitha might know my fan's going to be on the entire practice, so I can use that. But if it's a sound that's passing, or if it's the heater that turns on and off, whatever it might be, we don't want to pick that sound. So we want to pick a sound that's happening consistently in the present moment. Chuck did my dog snoring. Fantastic, Chuck. I love that. And then come back to what we're focusing on. So we did a sound. Sound is really great for people when they don't want to go inward. So if we're having a day where we're especially anxious and we don't want to look inward because that seems hard, focus on a sound. Focus on something outside of the body. Breath is really good because we can use it wherever we're at. Some people get anxious watching the breath because they say, oh, am I breathing wrong? Is my breath too shallow? Is my breath too long, right? So for those people, focus on something else. If you didn't like sound and you didn't like breath, you can use anything. You can pick a word to repeat to yourself. You can count. So counting is really helpful, especially if our mind is very busy. Count the breath. You can pick an object on your desk and just look at that object. Notice the mind is wandering. Notice the eyes are wandering. Come back. So you can literally pick anything that's happening consistently in the present moment. Did anyone like the counting for the breath? You can use the chatter and mute yourself. Anyone not like the counting? What'd you think of the counting? One more thing to do, so I ignored it. Yeah, great. I like it because it makes you feel focused. Counting helps me stay focused. Fantastic. So some people might like it. Some people might not like it. I like it for days where I feel very anxious because it gives me something to do, to hold on to, gives my mind an anchor, an extra thing. But sometimes it can feel like one more thing to do. So certainly experiment with what feels right for you. It distracted Jackie, which certainly can happen. Just a quick note on how we were counting. So we were inhaling for 2 and exhaling for 4. anytime you double the exhale to the inhale, you're automatically triggering the parasympathetic nervous system, which is in charge of rest and digestion. So anytime you feel especially stressed or anxious, double the exhale to the inhale. You can do that anywhere, anytime. Inhale 2, exhale 4, inhale 1, exhale 2, 3, 6, 4, 8. You're all smart people. Just double the exhale to the inhale, and that automatically calms the nervous system down. So if you didn't like doing it in your mindfulness practice, scratch that, but know that you have that practice in your back pocket for if you're in a very stressful or agitating situation. You can do that. Inhale, nose, exhale, nose or mouth. Automatically calms down the nervous system. Any questions on that? It's a super simple technique that I literally do at the post office. I do in traffic. You can do it anywhere. So Alex said, I found the counting a little less distracting to make my breath match my counting, but just breathing was a little less stressful. Fantastic. Yeah. So Alex, you can experiment with that and you might find that different days you like different things. So any other questions on this practice? So here's what we did. And I actually have a fun diagram. If anyone's interested in the brain science, I have a fun diagram that's this same diagram with the parts of the brain that are activated and changing as you do each practice or each step in the process. But here's what's happening. We choose something to focus on. Again, here it's the breath. Our mind wanders. We notice our attention has wandered, and this might take us 10 seconds and it might take us 10 minutes. So we may have made an entire grocery list in our mind before we go, oh yeah, I was supposed to focus on the breath. Okay, let me come back, right? So we notice our attention has wandered. We stop the mind wandering and redirect the attention back to the breath. So we say, okay, my mind's wandering, let me come back. And then the whole process happens all over again. And this is our mindfulness practice. And if I could add something to this diagram, which I might for future presentations, I would put non-judgment right here, because that's the center of this. This will consistently happen, and okay, we're not judging it. And the more you do this, the more the neural pathways associated with focus and attention will thicken, so the easier it will become for you to notice that your mind is wandering. So, living in the present moment is one of the most powerful ways to live with uncertainty in a positive way. And I'm a recovering perfectionist myself, so that typo is going to bother me all day long, just so you know. But it's one of the most powerful ways to live with uncertainty in the present moment. And this practice helps us focus on what is actually happening and less on what might happen. We create all these imaginary scenarios in our mind about the future, and mindfulness helps us bring us back to the present moment. It helps decrease those worries about the what ifs. So to recap, and then just some home practice if you are going to come back for the next sessions, here's what we talked about today, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions. So we talked about the negative impact of chronic stress, why we don't want that in our lives. Not all stress is bad, a lot of it is. And when we don't actually regulate our nervous system and have a healthier relationship with stress, it can impact us as individuals and organizations. Mindfulness helps us down-regulate the fight or flight response, sympathetic nervous system, return us to baseline. This present moment awareness is the aspect of mindfulness that helps us cope with uncertainty. And we can bring ourselves back into the present moment first by noticing that our mind isn't in the present moment. That's the very first step. Oh, I notice I'm thinking about all these scenarios that might happen. Okay, let me come back to the present moment. So noticing first, and then we bring ourselves back by noticing or focusing our attention on something that is happening consistently in the here and now. So that might be mindful breath watching. I love this simple 5 senses activity. So we can say, what are 5 things I see, 4 things I hear, 3 things I feel, 2 things I smell, and 1 thing I taste. Boom, you're in the present moment. And you can do that anywhere, anytime. Mindful walking is another great way to bring your attention into the present moment. So if you find yourself spiraling with anxiety or stress and uncertainty, go for a walk and notice what you see around you. So don't put a podcast on, don't put your music on, don't call a client. actually look around you and see what you see. And you can do this by saying, I'm going to notice all the red things on my walk, or I'm going to notice the trees, or I'm going to focus on this aspect of my walk, and actually bring your attention into the present moment. Use that experience to ground and anchor you in the present. So these are some ways you can both formally practice through seated meditation and informally practice throughout your day to decrease uncertainty and thus decrease worry and anxiety. What questions do you have about this? And Deborah, I do 2 7-day silent retreats a year. So I'm really comfortable with silence. So I'll wait if anyone has any questions, give you time. And you can use the chat or you can unmute yourself. And if you don't have any questions, is there anything on this list that you might commit to over the next week to practicing? Mindful breath watching, fantastic. Yeah. How do you deal with others who are in the limbic system, clients, employees, etc.? That's a fantastic question. And we have a whole series on relationships coming up, or session on relationships. The most important thing you can do is regulate your own emotions. So emotions are contagious. We know this from social psychology, and we know this from practice in our lives. So let's say if someone's screaming at you, if you scream back, what is that person going to do? They're going to yell louder, and you're going to yell louder. Our emotions are contagious. So if you notice, oh, wow, that person is reacting in a very intense way, I bet they're in their limbic system. I bet they're really anxious, nervous, and uncertain about things. If you can remain calm, which is a very hard thing to do, that emotion of calmness is also contagious. So you can de-escalate the situation by noticing your own internal reactions, doing that inhale, double exhale, keeping yourself calm and centered, and then responding in a balanced response. Tabitha, does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I think what I was getting to is I specifically have clients that oftentimes will, I will just tell them to breathe. Mm-hmm. Like when I'm interacting with them on the phone or I'm interacting with them in my office, I make them take 3 long breaths or breathe out longer than breathing in. And that tends to help them reset themselves, and you can communicate with them, because a lot of people aren't listening when they're in that limbic area.
Yeah, you can't learn. You can't listen when you're in that space. So depending on the relationship that you have with your coworker, family member, client, you could certainly say, let's take a few deep breaths. Okay, let's breathe together. Some people will react more aggressively to that than others. So some people may say, don't tell me to breathe. I don't need to breathe. I don't need to relax, right? So you experiment with who you have in your life, and you know those people best, and you know your relationships.
Exactly. I don't tend to have clients that don't listen to that. Right. And if I do, I'm like, okay, well, let's take a break and come back to this in a little bit. So, yeah.
Exactly. So Chuck says slow breathing is an important safety technique for panicking scuba divers. That could mean breathing in and out for, say, 6 seconds each. Would changing the time proportions to a relatively longer exhale improve on that? Or is a slow exhale mainly a speed bump to call general slowly? So Chuck, I'm not a scuba diver, but what I can say is if you breathe out longer, it definitely could decrease any anxiety that you're experiencing during that scuba diving activity. And maybe you can unmute yourself and clarify what the ultimate goal is with the breath there. That might help me answer better.
Sure. The goal is relaxing and stopping panic. And so slow breathing accomplishes that. And I think that's probably true whether the intake is faster than the exhale. Slow breathing either way, I thought, was maybe more important than one being longer or shorter than the other, but it could be that just breathing out slowly is what causes you to breathe slower altogether. I don't know.
That's an interesting question. So what I would say is slow breathing is very beneficial. We don't want to make the inhale longer than the exhale unless we need to. So if we've just exerted a lot of physical activity, we might need to take in more oxygen. But what we want to do for relaxation is either do a 4-4-5-5 count, where it's slow, long breathing, but the inhale is even to the exhale, or make the exhale longer.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So do you set a time for daily meditation or just wait until you feel your limbic system ramping up, or both? Alex, it's great. So it's going to be easier to use these skills in times of high stress when you practice them when you're calm. So it's really important to carve out even just 60 seconds a day when you're calm, in a safe place, at home, to start to practice these techniques to retrain your brain how to do them. And then, of course, when you feel that limbic system ramping up or you feel that stress increasing, you can do these techniques then to calm yourself down. But a lot easier to learn, back to Tabitha's point, when we're calm than when we're already stressed. And then for behavior change, I really suggest what we need is a behavior, a reward, and a trigger. So the behavior might be 60 seconds of mindful breath watching. The reward might be, I really want to feel more calm. And then the trigger is a reminder. So a Post-it note, same time of day, same location, something that reminds you to do that new behavior. You can habit chunk. So pick something you already do, like brushing your teeth, and do this new behavior right before it or right after it. So that brushing your teeth becomes your reminder, your trigger for the new behavior. Chuck says, I'm concerned about widespread limbic voting next month. Yeah, unfortunately, actually, Chuck, you might pick up the book Mindful Nation. Tim Ryan wrote it. He's trying to bring mindfulness to government. So it's a really interesting read. And he actually holds mindfulness sessions in DC for people who are in government. I've suggested clients breathe before too. That's awesome. How do you give time for worry and planning without being stressed? Fantastic. Jackie, so I actually recommend clients have a worry chair. So a place in your house or your office, and that is your worry space. And you go there and you set a timer and you worry for 15, 20 minutes about all the things you want to worry about. And then when that timer goes off, you're done. You come back to the present moment. So really important to carve out time for worry, but also carve out time for planning for the future. So I'm going to do all this planning for what if, worst case scenario. Okay, I'm ready. And now I'm going to come back to the present moment. So carve that into your schedule. Put time on your calendar. This is my worry time. I'm going to worry for these 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then I'm going to do something that's uplifting right after that. And then I'm going to go back to my day. Jackie, does that help? Thank you. Yes, great. Okay, so I am going to, through Rachel and Tabitha, send a follow-up email with information and then a guided practice that you can use as well. So I'll provide a 60-second and a 3-minute guided audio for mindful breath watching. So if you do want to start a daily practice, you can use either of those guided meditations. We'll also send some apps that we like as well. So you can use those to start, and then I'll remind you of those informal ways to practice. So if you say, Meriden, I'm never going to sit and meditate, you can still do those informal things throughout your day that will help and benefit you in a similar way. So thank you so much for your time today. Any final questions before we wrap up? Great. And then if you have specific questions, please feel free to email me directly. I'm happy to answer any personal questions that you have. Thank you all so much.
Hey everyone, we will be back next Monday talking about relationships, and I hope that we can have all of you attend again and bring someone with you, because each session can be attended individually. So if you know people who would be interested, we would welcome their attendance.
Great. Thanks, Tabitha.
We're going to throw it to Rachel and she's going to end it. So we will see you guys soon.